Trump admin allows Chevron to resume oil operations in Venezuela. A closer look. The Trump administration has made a controversial move by granting Chevron permission to resume oil extraction in Venezuela, effectively overturning a previous ban. This decision is believed to be linked to a recent prisoner exchange deal, resulting in the release of 10 American detainees by the Venezuelan government. In return, the U.S. facilitated the return of 252 Venezuelan deportees from a counterterrorism prison in El Salvador. Chevron initially secured a license to operate in Venezuela under the Biden administration in 2022, following Nicolás Maduro's expression of willingness to hold fair elections. However, free elections never materialized, with the U.S. recognizing Maduro's opposition as the legitimate winner. Despite this, Maduro retained power. In February, the Trump administration revoked Chevron's license, setting a May deadline for the company to cease operations. This move was applauded by staunch critics of the regime, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, but it faced criticism from oil industry interests and MAGA supporters like Laura Loomer, who argued it would hand over Venezuela's oil fields to China. President Donald Trump, in a post on Truth Social, declared, "We are hereby reversing the concessions that crooked Joe Biden gave to Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela." A Chevron spokesperson responded to the news of the new license, stating, "Chevron operates globally in compliance with applicable laws and regulations, including U.S. government sanctions frameworks, even in Venezuela." The Trump administration's decision to allow Chevron back into Venezuela has sparked debate. In May, Trump and his Venezuela negotiator, Rick Grenell, sought to extend the May deadline, but faced resistance from other Republicans. 3 Florida House Republicans threatened to oppose Trump's tax and spending package if the deal proceeded. Secretary Rubio intervened, assuring that the license would expire as scheduled on May 27th. The State Department has now stated that it will implement safeguards to prevent the Maduro regime from profiting from oil sales, as confirmed by a senior official to Fox Business. Interestingly, the trio of House Republicans who initially opposed the deal, Reps Mario Diaz-Balart, Maria Elvira Salazar, and Carlos Jimenez, now approve of it. They wrote in a joint statement, "No matter what the Maduro regime says, they will receive no benefits." They praised President Trump's record in standing up against anti-American dictators in the Western Hemisphere. This move reflects the shift in foreign policy thinking, with Rubio suggesting that the State Department will focus more on U.S. strategic interests rather than publicly commenting on foreign elections. The exact terms of the new Chevron license are not publicly known, but it is hard to imagine Maduro agreeing to a deal that doesn't directly benefit his regime. Francisco Monaldi, director of the Latin America Energy Program at Rice University, told Fox News Digital, "Maduro needs to gain something." Monaldi suggests that selling to the U.S. could be a more cost-effective alternative for Maduro compared to China, which pays less and incurs higher transport costs. He might be willing to accept a relatively tough deal with the U.S. because it cannot be much worse than what he gets in China, Monaldi added. Alternatively, Maduro may expect a license similar to the one under the Biden administration, which reportedly allowed his government to collect hundreds of millions in taxes on oil sales to the U.S. through a scheme reported by Bloomberg. Southern U.S. refiners are eager for the resumption of heavy Venezuelan oil, as it is well suited for refineries in the Gulf Coast of Texas and Louisiana, according to Monaldi. The key question now is whether the deal will be strictly limited and heavily regulated, or if it will open the door for other companies to invest in Venezuelan oil. Monaldi asks, will Secretary Rubio implement this policy as a minimum to attract Maduro and Chevron to operate in Venezuela? Or will it be a more expansive policy, granting licenses not only to Chevron, but also to other interested companies, such as European or American firms? All of these companies will require licenses from the U.S. to operate. Fox Business has reached out to the White House for comment, but has not yet received a reply. Trump allows Chevron to resume oil operations in Venezuela. Imagine a scenario where the Trump administration decided to give Chevron, a major U.S. energy company, the green light to restart its oil operations in Venezuela, just 4 months after revoking the same license. This decision came with a twist, especially considering the contentious political climate surrounding Venezuela. But here's where it gets controversial. The administration cited President Nicolás Maduro's refusal to quickly repatriate Venezuelans deported to the United States as a reason for initially canceling the license. However, they later negotiated the return of 252 Venezuelans for the Salvadorian prison in exchange for freeing 10 U.S. citizens held in Venezuela, paving the way for Chevron's return. Sources familiar with the decision revealed that Chevron can now resume oil production and export it to the U.S., much like under its previous license granted by the Biden administration. This move aligns with Trump's broader policy shift towards the more pragmatic approach, emphasizing strategic interests over ideological stances. In a cable to diplomatic missions, Secretary of State Marco Rubio advised against commenting on the legitimacy of foreign elections, quoting Trump's belief in sovereign nations pursuing their unique paths. Despite this apparent shift, the State Department maintains that Maduro's regime remains illegitimate and continues to oppose any funding that supports the oppression of the Venezuelan people. The U.S. stance on Venezuela has been volatile, with Trump initially declaring Maduro's election fraudulent and imposing sanctions, while the Biden administration attempted negotiations for free elections. During Trump's campaign, he criticized Biden for being too accommodating towards Maduro, a sentiment echoed by Rubio during his confirmation hearings. The administration's decision to reissue the Chevron license reflects a recalibration of priorities, particularly in countering Chinese influence in the oil market and addressing the migrant crisis. Interestingly, the timing of this decision coincided with increased Venezuelan oil exports to China and legal changes regarding migrant deportations. At a White House meeting involving Rubio and Stephen Miller, the administration discussed how enhanced cooperation from Venezuela on deportations could justify resuming business with U.S. companies. This strategic alignment underscores the complex interplay between economic interests and geopolitical maneuvering. Chevron, in response, stated that it operates within legal and regulatory frameworks, including U.S. sanctions. The specifics of the new license remain undisclosed, but it's expected to follow similar terms to the previous one, allowing Chevron to pump oil for 6 months, with the possibility of renewal. The proceeds will contribute to Venezuela's debt repayment to the U.S. This decision raises questions about the balance between economic pragmatism and moral principles in international relations. How do strategic interests influence U.S. policies towards regimes deemed illegitimate? What are the long-term implications for Venezuela and US-Venezuela relations? These are important considerations as we navigate the evolving landscape of global politics and economics. Trump administration allows Chevron to resume oil production in Venezuela. In a surprising turn of events, the Trump administration has granted Chevron permission to restart its oil operations in Venezuela, a move that marks a dramatic shift in U.S. policy toward the South American nation's socialist government. This decision has sparked widespread debate and left many wondering, what does this mean for America's stance on authoritarian regimes? But here's where it gets controversial. This reversal comes just days after a high-profile prisoner exchange between the U.S. and Venezuela, raising questions about whether diplomacy or economic interests took center stage. While specifics of the arrangement remain under wraps, sources close to the situation reveal that top officials, including President Donald Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, were involved in discussions leading up to this decision. The timing is no coincidence. Last week's landmark deal saw the release of all 10 Americans who had been detained by Venezuelan authorities. Could this be evidence of a quid pro quo? Or is this simply smart geopolitical maneuvering aimed at stabilizing relations while advancing U.S. energy goals? For those unfamiliar with the backstory, Chevron, one of the largest oil companies globally, has long operated in Venezuela, but faced restrictions due to sanctions imposed against the Maduro regime. These measures were designed to pressure Nicolás Maduro's government into adopting democratic reforms. However, allowing Chevron to resume pumping oil signals the potential softening of these sanctions, even if only temporarily. And this is the part most people miss. It's not just about Chevron or Venezuela. It also reflects broader tensions within U.S. foreign policy. How do you balance moral imperatives like human rights with practical needs like securing energy resources? This development raises thought-provoking questions. Is easing sanctions on Venezuela a necessary step toward fostering dialogue and progress? Or does it risk legitimizing an undemocratic regime? What are your thoughts? Do you believe this decision strikes the right balance? Or does it lean too far in favor of economic gain over ethical considerations? Share your perspective in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.